poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Well, hello there, my friend, and welcome to Chasing Poker Greatness. I'm your host, Brad Wilson, founder of poker training site EnhanceYourEdge.com, and I am super thrilled to have you with me here today. On today's show, I'm speaking with Robbie Strazynski, founder of Card Player Lifestyle. Although he's not a professional poker player, Robbie describes himself as a very serious recreational player. He works hard to learn and improve his own game while keeping up with some of the world's top poker talent. Robbie's made immeasurable contributions to the game through his own blog, cardplayerlifestyle.com, as well as other media since he got started around 2009. He's a well-respected member of the community, admired by both the players and the fans. Robbie knows and is known by many people in the poker world. He's interviewed some of the greats in the game like Daniel Negreanu, Phil Helmuth, and Phil Ivey. Card Player Lifestyle is considered to be one of the top poker entertainment websites on the internet. Robbie himself is the main writer and also acts as editor for all of the contributed content that he publishes. The site delivers in-depth interviews with some of the most well-known industry faces, exciting news about happenings and events, must-read strategy articles, and, of course, all kinds of things about the poker lifestyle. In today's episode, you'll get Robbie's insights on what it means to reach the levels of high achievement at poker or anything else, the players he considers to be truly great, and why. He speaks on the benefits of keeping the brain active by playing poker, as well as other ways that the game can benefit you when you're away from the table. He tells a story about how he was pretty much forced to learn to stop thinking about the money and just play the game, as he tells an amazing comeback story that starts with him basically losing all of the money that he took with him to Las Vegas. He also relates two brilliant and quite personal stories, one about Daniel Negreanu and another about Phil Helmuth, that will show you exactly why you shouldn't always believe everything you see on TV. Robbie also has some very interesting ideas about what kind of advice he would share with himself if he could go back in time and set his 20-year-old self up on a different path. I don't want to give too much away here, so maybe we should just get right into it and you can hear it all for yourself. And so, my loyal listeners, without any further ado, Robbie Strazynski. Robbie, what's happening, my man? How you doing?
Hey, nice to meet you, Brad. Finally, all that virtual talk back and forth. Great to put a face and a voice with the name. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Same goes for me. Super pumped to have you on the show. Interested in hearing your story. I know the audience is going to love it.
I hope so.
So let's start out by just telling the audience how you got started playing cards. How did you get in this niche?
I started playing cards when I was about 8 years old. My dad taught me. He always loved playing cards, and he loved playing poker specifically. This is a much more innocent time, I guess. I had one of those little video poker machines, like draw poker, that sort of thing. Anytime I could get my hands on a Nintendo or a Game Boy, like a Caesar's Palace game where I could do the gambling type of stuff. I always had a penchant. I always liked that sort of thing. We lived in LA growing up, and, it's 4 hour drive to Las Vegas. And this was, mid 90s, early 90s, when that was the family vacation capital of America, of the universe. And, my parents, they said we'd go for the weekends 4 or 5 times a year. We'd go play in the arcades. My mom would go play slots. My dad would go play poker. And, we would just play, 25 cents, amongst ourselves, myself, my brothers, 5-card draw. And then my dad taught me stud, all that sort of stuff. So he originally taught me when I was 8 years old. We used to just play for fun, no stakes or anything like that. but I was always drawn to it. I loved it. You know, a little kid in Las Vegas, you know, a little purer Vegas before the whole corporate stuff kind of went in. And it really was, you know, a playground. And I loved it. My dad used to come back and say, hey, look, and he opened his wallet, a bunch of $100 bills. I learned later that it wasn't always wins. Sometimes it was an ATM. But I was like, oh, this poker thing is so cool. I love it. And that's how I got into it. Industry-wise was significantly later. You could say like product of the moneymaker boom that, you know, like a lot of people out there, in terms of me starting to play in my own home game with my buddies. And, you know, fast forward just a little bit because, you know, sort of busy having a life, getting married and, you know, kids, all that sort of stuff. But in 2009, so really almost 10 years ago, I just, you know, on a whim with a buddy of mine started this blog called cardplayerlifestyle.com. We liked the name. It wasn't taken. The domain was free. And he was like, well, I know webmastering and you know how to write and you know about poker. So let's just put it out there. This was, you know, a lot of blogs were going out there at the time. You know, I don't want to get into the whole story just yet, and maybe you may have some questions about it, but that's sort of how I dipped my toe into what you call the poker industry and the poker world beyond just sort of little home games, for the first time.
I certainly do have questions. And I want to say, too, that the 90s, going to Vegas for the family vacation, a purer version. It was at least post-Mafia version, right?
Yes, it was. Very sanitized. We used to get a lot of, brochures in the mail, come to the Mirage, come to Treasure Island. And my parents played, so they'd comp to stay. They're very happy to just get you there. And then, and they treated you a lot more nicely. It was much easier to get these comp breakfast, comp this, and just to make sure you were there. And it was just a really affordable, cheap family vacation destination. Circus was in its heyday. They had the brand new Adventure Dome at the time. The Treasure Island was, much more about pirates rather than the sirens. So it was a very different time. And I got to say, those who did that, I don't know if it's the same people doing the marketing today or, their successors, but the people who are going today and spending all the money at the clubs and at the pools and all that other sort of stuff, it's the same. It's me and you. It's the kids who were growing up in the 90s and got used to this idea of going to Vegas. So, we just grew up a little. Dare I say, you heard it here first, maybe 10 years from now, something like that, when all of us grow up a little bit more and have our own kids, maybe we'll see the marketing message change once again for Las Vegas. We'll see.
Yeah, it seems to be something that changes every few decades or so.
Yeah, right now, they got to reinvent themselves, sure.
Yeah, we got the DJs and all the club atmosphere and all that sort of thing.
Right? Yeah, sure.
Right. Which is not me, by the way. None of those things apply to me.
I've never been to a club in my life, believe it or not.
Unfortunately, I have. And in my opinion, you're not missing very much.
Okay.
I'm not a club goer.
Right.
I'm not a big drinker. And the heat crushes me. So Vegas, I haven't spent a ton of time in Vegas personally. I'm an LA person. You grew up in the right place for poker rooms.
Yes.
I love LA.
Absolutely. That's great. And also, weather-wise, it's also perfect as well. That's one thing. And I live in Israel now for the last, 21 years. So I left, when I was 16. So I never, if I was still living there, I'd be like, oh, it's the poker capital of the world, even more so than Las Vegas to an extent. So I sort of missed out on that. I was never a grown-up in LA, but, hearing stories from my dad, he said, oh, yeah, I used to, get off work, or finish work and just go for a couple hours to the bike or to Commerce. And it's like, oh, that sounds like I'm romanticizing it, but it really was just cool. That was, the place to play. And, I say, well, that's one of the things I kind of miss or regret that I don't live there, but happy where I am. Yeah,
I do love it for poker, but definitely other places to live that are okay. So the name of the podcast is Chasing Poker Greatness, which to me it can be an abstract. Greatness can be an abstract word. So I would like to ask you, what does poker greatness mean to you?
I think just sort of it can be compared to any other sort of pursuit, whether it's an athletic pursuit, tennis, golf, like an individual pursuit of that nature, or, being a musician or any of the arts, so to speak, or even just being a great chess player. It's something that, you sort of realize, for a mind sport, whatever it is, or even, an athletic sport that requires, physical training and stuff, the single-minded, dedicated focus to being the absolute best, first and foremost, that you can be. And then, if there's competition in that, direct competition, you obviously have got to beat your competitors. I always think of, the Kobe Bryant example of, he didn't just rely on his God-given talents. He also went to the gym at 3, 4, 5 in the morning, and he had his people, his team, the Lakers, whatever, they made tapes for him in advance of the opponents so that he could individually scout what their tendencies were. Like, that was the extent that this man was, plenty of money, and had all the fans, had everything, but he was still, till his last game,
possessed.
Exactly. Obsessed, possessed, and, just driven to be the absolute, to make them squeeze every ounce of everything out of his body, out of his brain, and out of his teammates, and just to be the best. So, again, what the phrase you used in the question was, chasing greatness. I think, that's what it means. It's never, ever, ever resting on your laurels and always striving to improve. Even if you're already number one, it's, I wouldn't say looking over your shoulder necessarily, but saying, okay, how do I even get better? How do I, for poker, how do I examine my play and what mistakes did I make? And, okay, even if I played perfectly, did I maximize? Could I have made even more money? And, what are the newest theories and how, so all that sort of stuff. I think those are the essential ingredients of what it means to chase greatness.
That is a great answer, sir. And you've given me a softball here.
Oh, so, sure.
Instead of Kobe Bryant, when you think of greatness in a poker player, who's the first person that comes to mind?
Well, the sentimental choice is Chip Reese, but I was never exposed to him, of blessed memory. I was never exposed to him personally. I didn't know him, but it's all from what I've heard from people secondhand, both players as well as other media that I've read about him. And what they always said is that his B game, his C game, his D game was the same as his A game. And, I don't know if it's possible to define greatness more than that. And it's like, he knew when he wasn't running well, he knew he's not going to tilt. He'll never he'll never just sort of stay there and try to dig himself out of the hole. He'll just get up and leave. And sometimes people didn't even notice he was gone. So that is part of it. And also part of the reason I would choose him is because he was a master at every single poker discipline. And I think this sort of branches a little bit into a different topic, like who's the greatest poker player, whatever it is. But so many people all look at the GTO wizards, and I respect them, and they do tremendous stuff, and they're playing nosebleeds, high stakes, everything, but they're only playing Texas Hold'em. There are dozens of versions and variants of poker, and in my opinion, not everyone's opinion, in my opinion, to be considered even in the conversation of the greatest, you have to be a master at all different variants of the game, not just Hold'em, not just short deck, not just PLO. So, that's the first, he's no longer with us, but that's who I would choose immediately. To put me on the spot for who's still active, alive, and doing that sort of thing. Again, I kind of want to say Phil Ivey for the same reasons. Maybe he doesn't have the 50K bracelet or anything like that, but I still do think that there's that Ivey mystique. Even at Texas Hold'em, at the 25K and up buy-in tournament levels, certainly in the cash games. And again, they're not playing Badoogie, Badesi, 7 stud with him. He's still, a master at those games. And so many of his contemporaries and still even newer players today, they're saying, well, he's still the man. So I think that's the best answer I could give you, the most educated answer based on everything that I've read and people that I've spoken with.
Well, I think not just you, but, Doyle's word carries a lot of weight with me, Doyle's opinion. And he said a lot of the same things about Chip Reese. I mean, the 50K horse is named after Chip Reese in his memory.
Yes.
All the players seem to respect him, especially the high stakes players. And that goes a long way as well. So it's very hard to very hard to make a counter argument to
Yes.
those two. And Phil Ivey, of course, is just a beast, and it feels like he's been around forever, beasting it up, playing all the games.
Sure, and I believe the story was, when Chip Reese first saw Phil Ivey playing, he's, whispered in Doyle's ear, watch that guy, he's going to be great someday. Or so it was almost like a virtual passing of the torch, as it were. I will mention one thing, and it's important, you did mention Doyle Brunson. He's also in the conversation for the same reasons, but also one additional reason is, he's been doing this since his 20s, and he's in his mid-80s and still doing it. It's one of those criteria to be a member inducted into the Poker Hall of Fame is the what do they call it? The
longevity.
The longevity, playing against the highest stakes competition for just a really super duper long time. Like the Babe Ruth style of he just did it for his entire career till his last out. So there is, of course, something to be said. He would also admit he's not the player he was necessarily in his 30s and 40s, but half a step slower, he could still beat the pants off you and me, I imagine, in any mixed game, any high stakes. So, he certainly merits a mention as well.
And shockingly, I know this is going to shock you, you're not the first person to mention Doyle and his longevity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it does mean a lot, and apparently poker players age much better than other activities. If Doyle is successful in his 80s, hard to find some NFL quarterbacks that are successful in their 80s.
True.
Chunking around the pigskin.
Well, I mean, it is a mind sport at the end of the day, and I think even studies have been done that continuing to play poker or just the game itself, it activates parts of the brain. It prevents Alzheimer's, or that sort of a thing. And when you're just doing it day in and day out, and you're so used to doing it, imagine like the equivalent, physically speaking, would be just running every single day. And when your body's so used to doing that sort of thing, it's almost second nature. He thankfully continues to be well of sound mind, and your body may betray you, but if your mind doesn't, then there's no reason why you can't continue to play at at your optimal level.
Right. And there's also a lot of study on reading as well. It's activating the brain, keeping the brain active and engaged. And I would imagine poker, with its problem solving and the analytical side, does some pretty good things to the brain.
Yep.
Tell me about a time in poker that you failed or that you felt super low about yourself as a player, and what did you do? What happened to overcome that?
Well, as a player, there's this one particular instance that comes to mind. It was last year. I was in Las Vegas. It was for the World Poker Tour Tournament of Champions. I was there to do media coverage. And I'll just say, for those who may not know in the audience, I'm not a professional player. I'm a serious recreational player. I'm not studying math charts or things like that, but I take the game seriously. I want to win, and I try to learn from play and from watching and all that other sort of stuff. So, when I wasn't, working, I'm self-employed, so I'm not on the clock or anything. When I decided, okay, I've had enough work for the day, I went ahead and played. And, for, must have been 4 days in a row. And, these were anywhere from 6 to 8 hour sessions in the evenings. Every single session was a loser. And, I played, there 1-2, no limit hold'em, nothing super snazzy or anything like that. Even that, though, it may sound funny, is slightly higher stakes than I normally play. I live in Israel, and we use a different currency called the shekel, and we normally play 1-2 shekels here. So it's about a third of the value. So it takes me that much longer to build up the bankroll. And again, I'm not playing every single day, so it's I'll get a game once a week in the home game. So it takes me that much longer. So I don't feel intimidated or out of my league or anything, but just the stakes are higher than I'm used to, and my bankroll has to be adjusted accordingly. 4 straight losing sessions, a few $100s each time, ain't fun, especially when you know how long it's taken you to earn those many hundreds, little over $1,000, that sort of thing. And it was the last day of the trip. And I found myself here I am 7,500 miles away from home in Israel. And I want to play, but I can't lose anymore. I've exhausted the part of the bankroll that I have brought with me. And, what I did is I just sort of locked myself up in my room all day and worked. It's just like the most pathetic sounding thing. I was staying at the Westgate and here the city of Las Vegas and all of its poker magnanimity, and the World Series is starting, and I'm not sitting and playing poker. I'm sitting and working in a hotel room, and, and my flight is, early tomorrow morning. This just sucks. It's horrible. And, that was really, I wasn't like sitting curled in a ball by a fireplace or anything like that. But as a player, it certainly felt like a failure. And with all that I knew about, there's short-term variance and things like that, it's not a fun place to be. And frankly, I just didn't know that I was willing to risk more of the bankroll, knowing that if I do lose, how would I feel? I tried to think in advance and be self-conscious and aware of that reality. It's never good to chase your losses, and it's hard for me to separate necessarily from one session to the next when, 1 time fine, 2 times fine, but, 4 in a row, it's rough. So what happened is a friend of mine who lives in Las Vegas, he was saying, hey, the Golden Knights were playing. I think it was it was the championship, it was game 1 or 2 or something like that. And he's like, after the Golden Knights game, you want to go out for dinner? So I was like, you know what? That's exactly what I need. And it's a great excuse to get out of the hotel room, stop working. I was like, oh, that's who I'll do, right? Okay, great. We sit and we're talking in the restaurant. And, he's like, how's it going, Robbie? I'm like, well, you're a good enough friend. I can tell you the truth. He says, lay it on, buddy. And I told him everything that was going on. And, he lives in Las Vegas. He's a professional player. And, he was kind of definitely empathizing with what I was going through. And at the same time, he's seen it all before. He knows what it's like. And I was just so grateful to be there with him in that moment. Like I'm alone when I'm there working. My family's very far away. And it's just good to have a friend, especially one who understands everything about poker in a situation like that. And he's like, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the Bellagio after this. I'm like, the Bellagio? Are you kidding me? I'm scared. I mean, that's where all the pros are. He said, Robbie, 1, 2, 1, 3 is the same 1, 2, 1, 3 wherever you're playing it. It's in the Bellagio. Okay, fine. I'll play my game. You play your game. I'll stake you. Pretend the money's gone and just play. If it goes, okay, no big deal. It's fine. And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, wow. Like it was almost a turning point. I'm changing, I'm going a little longer into your question than perhaps you had anticipated. But, that failure, here's, a glimmer of hope. Not like a degen of like, okay, I need to get in action, that sort of thing. But like, hey, someone believes in me after everything I said. He's given me a tip and, he doesn't care about the money. He's telling me I shouldn't care about the money, just focus on the game. And okay, let's give it a shot. He gave me $500. And, I said, okay, I'll, split it into 250s just in case. And I took the first 250 and within an hour it was gone. Just, second nut flush to the nut flush, on the
Sayonara.
flop.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just like, okay, what do I do now? And I went to him, he's playing this game. And I said, you should take this back. He says, I gave you the money. To me, I lost 500 already. You go and you just hit it. Do your best. I'm telling you, Brad, I got down to $22. That's all I had left. Uh-huh. And then variance shifted. At that moment, I was like, okay, I'm all in. And I'm literally, the typical pack up your bag, get ready to go. It wasn't meant to be. This was, after another hour. So 2.5 hours into the session, I'm down to the 22 out of $500. Doubled up. Interesting. Okay. Sit back down, control yourself. Managed to double up again a couple of hands later. I'm like, wait a minute, I got $88, $86. Let's play poker. I worked that thing back to $503. Okay, over the next couple hours. I could do no wrong. I wasn't playing differently, mind you. And it's just this incredible adrenaline rush. I paused. I walked away from the table, and I'm just like beaming. I'm like, this is the most incredible. I've never had anything like this happen before. Like just the rush of being so low and being uplifted so suddenly, but you're not doing anything different. It's really just the variance and the cards that are changing. And all of a sudden you feel unstoppable again. I was like, I think I should stop. He says, are you kidding me? Your flight's in the morning, buddy. You play all night. You run this rush. as long as it takes until you're tired and you can't play anymore. I'm like, are you serious? He goes, I told you already. The $500 for me is gone. I kept playing. I ran it up all the way to $807 another, couple hours later. And I was like, okay, my flight's in 3 hours. I got to go pack up. And I gave him back his $500. He says, no, 50-50. And we split everything. It was just really, really nice, And I love that story because it shows that, to me at least, that sometimes failure happens for a reason. Again, other times, sure, I'll lose the 500, but that one really gave me faith because, lows will happen. Failures certainly will happen, whether it's as a player or in other areas of life. But you really have to realize that sometimes those failures do happen for a reason, and you could really learn lessons from it. And I don't want to say embrace the failure because you don't want it to happen, but should it, then you should sort of welcome it and say, okay, don't get down on yourself. How could you learn from this? What could you do about it? Maybe something good will come of it. So, there you go. That's my failure story, I guess, as a player.
I love that story. There's so many things to unpack for me. A couple of things. Number one, the first thing is how valuable relationships, community, and friendships are as a poker player. People that will pick you up when you're down, people that will give you confidence when you're lacking confidence. I think it's
huge.
Those are two of the very most important things that every player, no matter recreational, professional, at every level, you need those people to help you. And plus, we talked a little before we started the show about me living at Commerce, playing high stakes poker 60 hours a week. And I do have some fond memories of giant winning days and winning massive pots. Most of my memories revolve around my friends, going to play basketball at Commerce, going to UCLA to play ball, meeting up with them, going to eat Korean barbecue, all of these different things, the fellowship. And those friendships were 100% the most valuable thing that I earned in my time in LA. So for those of you out there that are missing those relationships, I highly suggest take some actions towards, beginning them. Put yourself out there. The world, as they say, is full of lonely people waiting to make the first move. Make the first move. I think that there's untold value in it from just a life perspective and a poker perspective as well.
Yeah. Best ROI you'll ever get from an investment, that's for sure.
For sure. And the second thing I want to unpack too is all those emotions that you dealt with. those are the things that Chip Reese was able to keep in control, right? That whole emotional roller coaster, feeling horrible about yourself, and then feeling on top of the world, feeling like a loser when you're stuck, and feeling like a giant winner, an invincible monster when you're crushing it. I think that those are the things that he was able to dial back. That's part of his greatness, and a very integral part.
And those are traits to emulate. And I will say it's a book that I read a long time ago, and it still, stands the test. Oh, that's what it is. Stands the test of time. That's what the other criteria for Hall of Fame. But a book that certainly does that is the Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler. And he talks about this concept of inchworm, and basically the idea of like every new thing that you learn, it's hard the first time, but then it becomes second nature and you move on to the next hard thing to learn. That lesson, learning at that time, and I feel like that inchworm was moving forward for me, and it's that much easier for me next time to hopefully it shouldn't happen, but when it happens, to control those emotions. And Chip Reese, he, like you said, he mastered that as well.
Exposure is a big part of the process. How can you control your emotions if you never, how can you control your anger if you never experience anger? How can you deal with these emotions if you never experience them? And the first time you play, you sit down at a live table. At least in my experience, your heart is pounding out of your chest. You're nervous. You're shaking. You're scared. It's an environment that's different, than what you're used to, and you just keep exposing yourself to that environment. It gets more comfortable, and then all of a sudden, I feel very comfortable walking into any poker room in the world, grabbing my buy-in, sitting down and playing cards with people. You have to expose yourself to these sort of things.
What is up, you future star of poker, you? Coach Brad here, and I just wanted to take a moment to let you know about PKC Poker.
If you're sitting there wondering why is Coach Brad promoting this PKC poker app thing, allow me a moment to explain my why. Battling in cash games has been my livelihood for the past 15 years. It's how I survive and put food on the table, which makes it imperative that I either test out or seek qualified opinions on all of the poker platforms on the market. One juicy find can mean the difference between a meh year and an amazing family vacation in Hawaii kind of year. With that said, I've tried almost all the major poker apps on the market to date, and despite the hype about amazingly juicy games, I've come away from the experience unsatisfied. I was just never able to find amazing success against seemingly weak competition, and in one specific case, was getting outright destroyed by passive villains playing more than 50% of their hands. What the heck was going on? After many evenings sitting in the bathtub, wondering if I had lost it, I finally dug into the data and learned something that shouldn't have been too surprising to you. These dudes were colluding and super using their pants off. So I swore off those free money, decentralized devil apps and decided to go back to my more familiar streets of ignition. It was then that I was contacted by a good friend of mine who turned out to be the vice president of worldwide operations at PKC. Him and I had a long, in-depth conversation about security, the ecosystem, and the future direction of PKC, and he managed to convince me to give it a shot. That shot turned into an incredible 6 months with an hourly rate that's about 5 times what it would have been playing on any other US platform. As it turns out, I didn't forget how to play. I just needed a level playing field to return to my crushing ways. I have no doubt that you, my community, my audience, is going to play poker somewhere, and I want to be damn sure that you don't go through the pain and frustration I felt by messing around with any poker app besides PKC. This is why promoting PKC is a no-brainer. I love my community, and I want to put you in the best position to succeed at this game that we both love so much. So if you'd like to join me in the streets of PKC, simply head to enhanceyouredge.com/PKC and get your invite code to play. You must have an invite code, and you must be 21 years of age or older. One more time, that's enhanceyouredge.com/PKC. Best of luck, and now, on with the show.
And so I heard through the grapevine that you being in the media side of card playing and reporting and all these sorts of things, that you have a story about one Daniel Negreanu. Could we?
Yeah,
I you expand a little bit. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a personal story, actually. It's not necessarily to do with poker at the tables, but something that he did for me. He basically convinced me that pursuing this dream of doing what, of this poker media career was possible. And
how did
didn't
you do
believe
that?
it. Well, he was going, he's made very famous, over time. He went to this choice center, and enrolled in and learned a lot from it. And part of his process of learning was life coaching and, or learning how to be a life coach. And I asked him at the time, I was like, well, what does that mean to coach somebody? And, just like from a chat that we were having, it was digital on Facebook Messenger and stuff. And, he's like, okay, I'll show you. And then he started sort of guiding me through this process of like, what worries you, what's your anxieties, that sort of thing. And at the time, this is, I guess, 2015 or 16 or so, something like that. And I said, well, what I would really love to do is, go on few trips each year and be in this poker. I mean, Israel is like an island when it comes to poker. There's no poker rooms here. You can't play online. There's nothing. That's one of the hardest. I love living here, but it's one of the hardest things about living here is that the poker, everything is so far away. It's not like, you just get in your car and you can drive 2 hours or 3 hours or 7 hours. There's nothing here.
Right.
And this idea of me being involved and being ensconced in this poker industry seemed impossible to me just for logistical reasons and for, well, how would I make a living? Who would employ me if I don't live there? Like that sort of a thing. Over a period of, and I'm not exaggerating, Brad, over 2 hours of just chatting back and forth on Messenger. This is Daniel Negreanu. He's got a lot better things to do with his time.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. Like, no, I'm not. This is no. I think that helping people when they're struggling in life is one of the most valuable things that we can do. And in the instance of Daniel Negreanu there, he has an opportunity to help somebody out and serve someone else. And I think that's very, very valuable. So I wouldn't
with
minimize.
that, I agree. I don't know about wasting time on me, though. That's what I
Oh, come on. You got to kill this negative self-talk.
Oh, no, just self-deprecating. That's all.
Yeah. Isn't that what I said?
I'm one of the most positive guys you'll find in poker.
No. It's not negative self-talk. It's self-deprecating. Well,
there you go.
Isn't it the same?
Right. Well, it was like 10 in the morning or something, and that means midnight in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And that's when we started the conversation.
Right.
And what I mean is, like, he's got a lot going on. And for him to stop everything and, make me the center of his, 2 hours and quite literally not answer all my questions at the end. I have to answer these questions for myself, but legitimately and very, very really make me believe that the dreams that I really wanted, my dream life, was possible. That was what I still consider today the launching point of me working towards becoming independent, self-employed, and doing what I'm doing today full time. I had it all going on the side, and I had the desire, the passion, the enthusiasm, but I didn't know if I could put that together. And he convinced me it was possible, and I have him to thank for it. So
that is an awesome story, and I have no personal communication with Daniel Negreanu. I've always watched from afar. I got into poker, 15 years ago, and he's had his blog, and he's been big since then. So sure. I have read his stuff. I followed him. I've always liked him and been a fan of him, but that's very personal. That's an awesome story, and I would say too, as somebody who's dished out my fair share of solicited and unsolicited life advice to people, I would say that taking action and moving forward based on him helping you is also a rare thing, and I think that says a lot about you as a person. Lots of people want feedback, and they get it, and they never take action. They just fall asleep at the wheel, which is kind of a waste of time. So I would say that it's likely that Daniel Negreanu also sensed that you were an action taker. You're somebody that was worthy of investing those 2 hours in. And think about it. He spent 2 hours talking to you that one night. Look at what you've done for the poker community, the poker world over the ensuing years. So that time was actually very, very well spent in my mind.
Well, thanks for saying that, Ben. I really do appreciate that. And, I used to not tell too many people that story. I would do it privately, but, it's something in Hebrew, it's something called hakarat hatov is recognizing and being grateful for a kindness that someone has done to you, and giving very, very due credit where it's due. You said the importance of having friends. I do believe I can consider him a friend, and he's just a wonderful person. And the fact that it was him, saying that it's not pie in the sky, it's not, my brother or a friend from high school or something like that, someone who I know, a friend who doesn't know poker. This is someone who's been there, done that, gone broke, done everything there is to do in poker. And he knew I didn't want to become a pro player or anything, but just pursue that sort of dream. And for him to basically say, well, I believe you could do it. Now it's up for you to believe that you could do it. It was a huge boost in confidence. And, till today, it still motivates me when I'm down once in a while. I was like, well, other people think that I can do this sort of thing. I'm going to keep on plowing forward. So thanks for saying what you said. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, my man. And there is some, the word of Daniel Negreanu does probably carry more weight than the word of Brad Wilson too. So let's just put that out there on record on my show.
He's a good guy. He does a lot of things behind the scenes that people are not aware of, and just, more power to him. And, really, he's a force for good in general in the world. Okay,
let's go from force to good. Let's segue. You also have a story about Phil Helmuth. I don't know. I have no idea where this is going to go. Whether it's force of good or force of evil or force of whatever, but let's hear this story as well. I'm very curious.
Okay, so this one has more to do directly with poker, and let's use exactly what you said. He's somewhat of a polarizing figure. Some would say, and for all you guys out there who've watched all the videos on YouTube and watched the World Series, his nickname is the Poker Brat for good reason. with all of that persona, that larger than life persona that he is, the man is very, very, very much a class act, a tremendous human being. And I'll illustrate with this particular story. I was given the chance to interview him, just ahead of the release of the Poker Brat book. The publishers, D&B Poker, shout out to them. Actually, just released an article about their story, the D&B Poker, just as an aside. So Dan and Byron, they reached out to me and said, hey, Robbie, we've got this book coming out. Would you like to interview Phil Helmuth? And I was like, well, yeah, that'd be amazing. He says, okay, we'll put him in touch with you via email. And right away I start getting to work. And, as a guy I've been interviewed hundreds of times, how do I interview this guy and make it new, refreshing, interesting to him? I don't want it to seem that he's doing me a favor. I want to try to honor him and, produce something good that he enjoys working on. So I spent, a really long time, probably, a good week, listening to all the podcasts and watching the interviews and reading everything I could, coming together with a good script, prepared way too many questions. I'd be like, whatever I can get from him, I'll get. Sent him the email. And within 3 days, every single question was answered. And these were not one-word answers, Brad. These were just I have it up in an interview with Phil Helmuth on cardplayerlifestyle.com. You could read it. These are lengthy answers. He sent me pictures. He sent me everything to make this an outstanding interview piece of content. And he did it. He was like, I'll get to it soon. Don't worry. And, he wasn't BSing. He cared. And it was just so awesome to see that side. I didn't know who he was. It was just like, wow, I got to meet Phil this way. Amazing, right? Great. We published the article, and a couple months later, for the World Series of Poker, and at the D&B booth, with all the books. So he's doing the autograph session. So I'm standing in line, and I want to go ahead and buy a book and get an autograph. So I said, "Hi, Phil. Robbie Strazynski." He goes, "Robbie Strazynski." He stands up, he shakes my hand, he says, "We're giving this guy a book for free." He says, and he starts autographing. I'm like, wow, he remembered. It's like I'm legitimately thrilled. It's amazing, and it was just a really cool thrill as a fan. Someone, I'm a fan just like anyone else, and he says, I like your style, like your interview style. It's like, wow, that he didn't just. It wasn't just another interview for him. It just he made me feel like the center of his world again. Also, very, very cool thing. Great. Okay, that you think the story may end there, and here's where the aha comes. This summer, so this is now 2 years after the fact that, that we've done the interview. It's not like, we became buddy or we're in close touch or anything, but, I guess maybe he knew who I was, whatever it may be. So this summer, I played for the first time in my first bracelet event. And I wrote, just before, a couple days before I played, the $1,500 dealer's choice at the World Series. I wrote an article basically trying to hype myself up Rocky style and I'm going to get this. And really I was so emotional. Everything just sort of poured forth. It's time to play for the first time after all these years, my first bracelet event. I'm standing in the Rio hallways. This is going to be a day before the event happens. And I'm on the phone. Out of the Amazon room walks Phil Helmuth, and the hallways weren't so crowded. And maybe he's, 50, 60 feet away from me. He happens to, catch my eye. He was going the other direction, but he walks over to me as I'm on the phone, and I'm like, hold on 1 second. So he goes, Robbie, I read your article. I think that's really, really cool that you're playing your first bracelet event. Good for you. Good luck. And I'm standing there like, oh, what? It's like the guy who performs in the coffee shop, and then Elvis Presley walks up to him and says, "Oh, well, good for you." It's unbelievable. He could have recognized me and walked the other way. He all of those things to do something like that. And I say these things not because it's a story about me and stuff that I've gone through, but I say this to illustrate what a kind, genuinely nice person Phil Helmuth is. And it's important to me, at least, to spread stories like that, because what you see on camera is never, ever, ever the whole story. And unfortunately, sometimes only that bratty side of him comes out because he's just such a fierce competitor. But, beneath that exterior, whatever you want to call it, the man is just, a tremendously nice individual to have done that for me. And I very much, you don't bluff that. What does he have to gain from doing something like that? It's just an amazing gesture that I'll remember for the rest of my life.
Again, that is another incredible story. And I've heard a lot of good things about Phil Helmuth myself. I haven't had any direct interactions with the man, but all the stories that I've heard away from the poker table, genuinely good guy, that illustrates the level of thoughtfulness that he gave in answering all of your questions, the fact that he remembered you, and also is a fan of card player lifestyle, right? He's got to be. He's got to be on the email. Got to show.
There's the plug. There's the logo. It's cardplayerlifestyle.com.
He's a fan. He reads the articles, or he gets the emails or something. Yeah, that's an incredible story.
Yeah, it's a great feeling. It's very, very cool. The first thing I did is I called my dad. I'm like, Dad, you're never gonna believe what happened.
I was halfway hoping that you played in the $1,500 dealer choice and he threw some cards at you and yelled at you, but I'll accept the happy ending as well.
Yeah. That was good. Hopefully one day we'll get to a stage where we get to play at the same table, maybe heads up for a bracelet, and I'll be that guy who denies him number 17 or 16 or whatever it is.
That would be a good story. Probably a good article on card player lifestyle, I would think.
Yeah, at least one. I'll tell you that. At least one article.
See how long you can drag this out. Let's make this story last like 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, sure.
So if you were to gift the Chasing Poker Greatness audience one book, what would it be and why?
To gift the book to them?
Yes.
Okay, well, I don't know if you purposely set it up like this. I happen to have a copy right here. So there's the book. It's called Pulling the Trigger. And that man is Eli Elezra, right? So this is the story of his autobiography. The reason I happen to have it is because if you turn it around, see, that's me. I translated the book from Hebrew into English, right?
Because he's Israeli, right?
He is Israeli, very proud Israeli. And he grew up here in Israel and then chased his dreams in America and lives in Vegas for the last 30 years. So, I'm biased. Like, what can I say? It's like, it's not a strategy book. I like telling stories, as you hear, as all the audience hears. I'm a storyteller, and that's what I do on my site as well. This is just a great story. It's the story of his life, and how he, born in 1960 in Jerusalem prior to the 6-Day War, fought in the Golani Brigade bravely, got injured in battle, went to Alaska, and to try and earn money on the fishing boats there. Some incredible stories there. Found poker, fell in love with it, decided to pursue it at the expense of his business. Found Las Vegas. It's an incredible story. Just, I always said, wow, this ought to be a movie, that sort of a thing. It really is just an incredibly rich story with a lot of little cool stories that are poker related and not interspersed in between. Also, it's relatively new. It only came out in January in English. So, it's one that people are likely not to necessarily have read before. You can buy it on Amazon. But if I'm gifting it to you, I guess I'm gifting it to you. So that's what I would say. Definitely not a strategy book. He does go through some of the, more meaningful hands at his big, WPT, the Mirage Poker Showdown in 2004 when he won, and other hands that he played against some, incredible players and legends in their own right. But it's much more, in my opinion, at least, the book about, the stories and his poker life, his poker career, the ups, the downs, and there were, some tremendous ups and tremendous downs. I think you'd find it very interesting. And, as a storybook, I think that's the one to get for the time being. Yeah.
Sir, I had no idea. I could not see your desk. I don't know. It was a softball. The people listening are like, I don't trust this question.
No, really. Like, I didn't know if you knew, but I had it here to promote it at any point. But it worked out so well with your question. So thanks.
If you could go back in time and give your, say, 20-year-old self some poker wisdom, what would it be?
Start playing online poker now. So this is because that's 17 years ago. That's when the going was really, really good. If I could impart everything I know about poker to that 20-year-old guy, I'd be doing a lot better financially.
Well, as far as like actions taking, right? It's more like there's a carbon copy version of yourself who's 20 years old right now. What would you tell them? They're just starting their poker career. What advice would you give them? What wisdom would you share?
Again, as a player, right?
As a player, actually, as a player and or member of the community. Maybe not everybody in the audience has ambitions to be one of the best to ever play the game. Maybe their ambitions lie more on the editorial side. Maybe it lies on the story side or some other facet of the game. So
Okay.
just speak with your wisdom.
As a player, I would say get in as much experience as you can. Again, I'm assuming that this is a 20-year-old, 17 years ago, not, in 2019. It's a much, much, much steeper curve. And I know, I'm still true to myself. I know what I was like at 20. There's certain things I wouldn't necessarily be willing to do. I wouldn't, get with solvers and start memorizing math charts and stuff. But knowing what I know now of how that was a golden age for so many people, and so many people I know, contemporaries of mine, are saying, who aren't professionals at all, never were, but they said, oh, the going was so good at that point in time. Just from a purely financial standpoint, that was the best time to be playing, I think, in the history of poker, online and offline. And I'd say, for these, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years, do whatever you can, before the golden goose stops laying the eggs. It's the kind of, the Marty McFly finds the almanac, right? In Back to the Future too. It's like, that's where I would have wanted to be, from a purely poker standpoint, is make yourself, make sure you're in Los Angeles, in Las Vegas for all of these big events. You have all of that knowledge that you have now as a 37-year-old, and just get in while the getting is good before everyone starts getting better. And, you're not willing to put in the time in the lab necessarily. This is the time, and then save that money and do big things with it. And it's a little bit of a cop-out type of an answer, but that is what I would do. Just being consistent with myself. On the editorial side, it's something very different.
So I agree with a lot of what you said, because I was one of the people that were playing throughout the golden age of poker. And I will say that before the golden age of poker, before the information boom, because there has certainly been an information boom, in the 90s, in the 80s, the games were likely to be off the charts, super amazingly good, because there was so little information that existed. So I do think those games were really good. And as a player today, I do think that if you choose well where you play, you can play in some really good games as well. So games that rival the golden age of poker, and a very wise acquaintance of mine who, I believe it was 2013 or 2014, was the biggest winner in the world, tracked by High Stakes DB for the first 6 months. We were discussing poker in general and strategy, and how, the common narrative is that all you had to do is show up in 2004 and everybody just gave you money, right? Yeah. Everybody gave you money. But basically, we were dumb back then too, right? Even the pros, we knew a lot less. As poker progresses and evolves and grows, there's always money to be made. However, what has changed is the money is made deeper in the decision trees nowadays than it was back then. Back then, it was made in the 3-bets, the pre-flop strategy. That was where you could maximize your edge, and it was relatively easy.
Enhance your edge.
Enhance your edge. There you go. But it was relatively easy back then, and there's always going to be room to profit in poker. The more you grow, it's just deeper in the decision trees is where you're going to be able to maximize your wins. So I will add that on top of your answer.
I'll agree with that. On the editorial side, can I give that answer as well?
Yeah, of course.
Right. So on that, it's a funny thing. It's almost, you ever seen the movie Sliding Doors?
I haven't.
I think it's with Hugh Grant and Gwyneth Paltrow, and it's this idea of two alternate histories. What happens if you do make that subway train, or if you don't? The doors slide in front of you, or
butterfly
if you manage
effect.
to get in.
Yeah.
Exactly, similar type of thing. So on the one hand, I see now at 37 the way things have gone for me career-wise, and everything that happened leading up to this point, making me who I am. And I say I wouldn't change a thing, right? And you got to accept it and embrace it, and it's great, and realize that everything happened in a certain time and for reasons to make me who I am right now. I would be interested in terms of a sliding door effect to sort of see an alternate history if at age 20 already then I was saying, I would be one of those people who put even the blog that I have now, like the blogs then didn't look good, aesthetically speaking. The media then was very different. And, anyone who, it's a matter of, right place, right time to an extent. You happen to be the right age and in Las Vegas, Los Angeles. And if you started a media outlet, then there was also just ridiculous amounts of money to be made and reputation to be earned, in terms of historically, people who've been around for 15, 16, 17 years, they're few and far between that they're still involved now. But just the fact that you were there then just gives you so much more credibility. When Twitter begins, then, immediately get that many more followers just to start out. It's basically the snowball that you have to start out with. I started in 2009 and, in much more in earnest a couple of years later. And then when I became self-employed 2.5 years ago, I had to pack that together again, almost parallels the poker thing. Like the earlier you were there, the getting was good at the time. If I was doing that already at age 20 and had a website and had a domain, which was, now whatever it is, 19 years old instead of 10 years old, something like that, I would be interested to see, so where would I be career-wise and financially speaking, and what would my brand be, and, how many more people would I know? I'd just be curious to sort of see that alternate history. Not necessarily advice that I would give myself, but, I also realize very, very much that even then, you said, what does greatness mean? You have to be fully involved. The reason I wasn't able to is because I was doing all the family stuff. I got married, 17 and a half years ago. I was 20, right? Had I started the career in the professional path, I don't know that necessarily would have happened when it did, because I wouldn't have the headspace and the emotional ability to, share my life with another person and start having kids and all that other sort of stuff. So it's more of like the sliding doors of like, I possibly still would be single if that happened, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but like,
don't let your wife listen to this podcast, by the way. This is not for Robbie's wife to listen. He's saying some things now. He's saying some things.
No, it's all good. I wouldn't, as I said, I wouldn't change anything. I really wouldn't. But it's more of just like, it'd be interesting.
I would probably be single, and that would be fine.
No, I'm saying is that it's okay to be single. There's plenty of people who don't ever want to get married.
Oh, of course.
But it's more just like looking through that mirror into the alternate dimension, the bizarro world of like, I would probably for sure never have moved to Israel, or moved back to LA, because that's where the stuff is. All that sort of alternate history would be sort of interesting for me to sort of see.
Absolutely. And my parallel in the poker sense would be that I've always preferred cash games versus tournaments. And cash game players tend to go under the radar.
Yes.
They don't get, cash game victories don't get publicized, lesser chance of playing interviews or getting interviews, especially, if you're not playing the nosebleeds like Phil Ivey. Yep. People, cash game players go under the radar. I would like to see, had I fully invested myself into tournaments over my career, what that would have been.
Right.
I am still, we're 30. I'm 35. You're 37. We're not super old men. There's still time for me to invest myself in tournaments. And
it's never too late. Sure.
But I would be curious to see my lifetime results and, the level of, I guess, influence and authority that I would have been able to generate over the last 10 to 15 years.
It's the effect of compound interest, in a very real sense for both of those things. Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, I try, one of the quirks, we'll call it, of my personality is I'm naturally an introverted person. And so
really?
I'm
shocked. Anyone who hosts a podcast, how is that even possible? Really? Well, good for you. You fooled me.
So
nice bluff.
Introversion is actually not that you don't want to speak to people or that you don't want to communicate and that sort of thing. It's, one-to-one. This is actually the perfect spot for an introvert because it's a one-to-one conversation about something that I'm passionate about. And that is a perfect setup. Get me in front of a room with 150 people. Actually, just take me out to dinner with 12 people that I don't know. and I'll be completely invisible. Like
Wow.
I'll maybe there's one person that I connect with, and then I can have a genuine conversation, but I'll never be like the center of attention type person.
Interesting.
That's sort of how my personality works, and so there is some avoidance there as far as you do get attention when you win a poker tournament. So maybe that aspect of my personality is one of the reasons why I have enjoyed cash games, that level of anonymity over the years.
Got it.
All right, moving on. What's a project you're working on now that is near and dear to your heart?
It's
it doesn't
interesting.
have to be poker.
Oh, well, I mean, it's for a very long time, it actually was this, and I'm not, I don't need to plug, but, this was something I was working on sort of behind the scenes, when he came up to me and Ellie came up to me and, when the Hebrew book was released, that was my first really big project in poker. And I was, always having to balance that with, the regular stuff that I was doing media wise and, compartmentalize and take the time to do that. Once that finished, it sort of morphed into, doing marketing for him and all that stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily call that a project. To be honest with you, I don't really have anything actively that is a project right now. It's, the content game when you're doing media, basically no one wants to see the same newspaper one day after the next. No one wants to log into CNN and see the same articles over and over. It's just constantly feeding the content beast. And it very much, I don't want to use the word grind because in a sense that may imply that I don't enjoy it. I do. I'm not the only one doing the writing. I have plenty of fantastic contributors, but I function as the editor for my site. So that really is first and foremost and always at the front of my mind ongoing project, for lack of a better word. There is one project that's, I wouldn't say not on the back burner because I really, really do want to do it. I believe I have my own poker book in me. Just so many stories, again, storyteller, that I could tell over the last few years that I've been involved, the travels that I've done around the world and tournaments that I've covered and things that have happened to me individually. And again, that tied into my own personal background as someone who's Orthodox Jewish and living in Israel and a family man. That's just sort of my perspective on it. I think that, I could weave a nice yarn and I think that the stories would be interesting to people. But I can't unfortunately say, maybe it's a little failure on my part for now that I'm not actively working on it. It's just you got to keep on hitting those base hits, and getting on base with with the podcasts, with the other forms of media that I'm constantly producing. So something I need to do, something I want to do. And I've told myself I've done it. I have some building blocks in place, like a table of contents, and I know more or less the stories I want to tell. It's just I got to get around to it. So can't reveal the title, but hopefully when it does come a year, 2, 3 years, whatever it is from now, it's another great marketing tool to have. Hey, here's my book. I'm an author.
Do we have like a Daniel Negreanu bat signal that we can we can flare up and get him on your ass? Spend another 2 hours to get this book done. Paging Daniel Negreanu. Contact Robbie and make him write this book. No more procrastinating.
I will say there's a difference between procrastinating and taking one's foot off the gas pedal. And I do think it's an important distinction to make because not that I'm not as hungry as I used to be, but I feel now that, this media gig that I'm doing is the full-time job and I have the responsibility to sort of support, my family from it. I need to be focused on that. I need to just as a matter of circumstance. Whereas up until 2.5 years ago, it was always the side gig. And I quote unquote had more drive because I was staying up till ridiculous hours because I only got home at 6:30 and then had dinner and then the kids, all that stuff. And, between midnight and 2 was the only time I had. So now it's just, a matter of kind of kicking myself a little bit and making sure that, okay, it is 10 o'clock, it is 11 o'clock at night, get a chapter written, do it, So I don't want to say I'm lazy. It's just after a whole day of doing that, it's hard to consider it something different. It's like continuing to work for another 2 hours. So
I will say that when something's inside of you, it is a good thing to get it out. It means that you want to, that your body's telling you, hey, get this out of me. And Neil Gaiman. I listened to an interview with Neil Gaiman, who has, written Neverwhere, American Gods, Good Omens, just a bunch of really incredible, amazing books. I love Neil Gaiman, and I have this journal right here because of Neil Gaiman. And when he was writing Coraline, he had a lot of things going on, and it was something that he wanted to write a kid's book for his daughters, and he didn't have enough time, or he had so many projects that he was juggling. And he decided that instead of reading a few pages every night before bed, he would write a line. He wrote one line a night right before bed. And that just that just created momentum, and it built up. And then after 6 months, he said he had some chapters going, and
that's incredible.
And then that small little one line a day added up over time. And then eventually, he finished Coraline, and it got made into a movie, and it's this massive success thing. And it wouldn't have happened had he not just written that one line. So
you're so absolutely right.
I'm going to challenge you. You got time. You got time to write one line of your book, and in 6 months, you'll be further along than you think.
Damn right.
And maybe you write a paragraph, right? Maybe you write 3 lines a night. But just making that a practice and getting in there. Because I want you to write your book. I want to promote your book. I would be interested in reading your book. I love poker stories. So there you go.
Thank you. Right. I really appreciate that. And now I'm dropping knowledge bombs, but that's a real good one. Thank you. I really do mean that. And I hope I will act on that.
It's my pleasure, man. And, worst comes to worst, I'll get in touch with Daniel Negreanu, and he'll crack the whip, make you do it.
Yeah.
So final question.
Sure.
Where can the Chasing Poker Greatness audience find you on the interwebs?
Sure. So the main place where I'm very publicly active is on Twitter. It's @CardPlayerLife. That's just where I can directly engage with you guys. I have no problem giving out my email address. It's Robbie, ROBBIE, @cardplayerlifestyle.com. If there's anything you're interested in terms of stuff that I write, again, on my website, cardplayerlifestyle.com. I'm always, actively pushing out, new poker content that way. I have a podcast. It's called the Top Pair Home Game Poker Podcast. That's syndicated on the Poker News Podcast Network. You can listen to me there. Facebook, there aren't that many Robbie Strazynskis out there. So ROBBIE STRAZYNSKI, and always happy to make new friends and broaden my horizons. And hopefully once in a while, certainly the World Series of Poker, if I'm there, feel free to, if you see me, say hello, Phil Helmuth style. And anywhere else in the world, I always announce on social media where it is that I'm going next, whatever next tournament I'm covering. So, that's basically it.
Sir, if I'm at the WSOP next year, hope to meet up, have a beer or a glass of water. I don't really drink beer, but...
Same here. Diet Coke, man. Way to go.
Right. Water for me. I don't drink Diet Coke either. But just or maybe a very, very hibiscus from Starbucks. That works for me too. All right, man. I love the conversation. Can't wait to share it and promote it with the world. Thank you for coming on. It was very, very much a pleasure.
Well, this is so enjoyable. I mean, there's nothing more fun than talking about oneself, but much more fun when someone's actually taking an interest. I really appreciate it, and it's really, really, really great, Brett. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Chasing Poker Greatness. If you haven't yet subscribed to the show, please take a moment to do so on Apple Podcasts or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts may be. And once again, I also wanted to let you know about PKC Poker. If you're on the lookout for a new platform where the games are safe and secure and the action is amazing, head to enhanceyoredge.com/PKC to get your code and jump into the games. You must have a code to play as well as be 21 years of age or older. One final time, that's enhanceyoredge.com/PKC. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on Chasing Poker Greatness.